And I want us to listen to what the cabinet nominee for National Treasury said, because it's related to what just happened last week about the Finance Act 2023. Watch.
We don't have a lacuna. In fact, Finance Bill is an omnibus amendment bill. We have about 5 or 6 legislations that Finance Bill usually amends. We have excise duty, import duty, we have value-added tax, we have income tax, we have tax procedures acts, and then we have fees and levies. These are specific legislations. Mr. Speaker, this House, if I'm approved, this House should help me bring these legislations directly touching on these specific statutes. We don't have to have a finance bill.
All right. So, Dr. Nikal, John Mbadi was talking about, because the Finance Act 2023 was nullified, and of course, if you have to look at it, this is a bill that was intended to raise more than 300 billion shillings. Of course, that is inclusive of the housing levy. So, without housing levy, you're talking about between 240 to 60 billion shillings that is at stake in terms of a target. And it's the one that enables government to collect VAT on fuel up to 16% instead of 8%. It is the one that is also giving reliefs to members of the public, that they can buy LPG at a zero rate for VAT. If it's taken off, then they go back to 8%. I don't know what your thoughts are, because the court was really talking about public participation, indicting Parliament that indeed there was public participation, but there are many new clauses that were brought on board without being subjected to fresh public participation. What do you think would be the lessons, first for the government, but also for Parliament moving forward, because this appears quite drastic?
Not just first for the government, first for Parliament. You know, in my view, this vetting process, as we see and say we are vetting cabinet secretaries, I think Parliament is being vetted. I think that's something we have to take in mind, that Parliament itself is being vetted by the country. Because I told you earlier that the cabinet secretaries are going to meet some issues that relate to legislation. Honorable Mbadi has just said that there are about 4 legislations that are affected, and if he needs to do anything, he'll have to bring that one in. But why did the court decide that those were unconstitutional on the basis of participation? Honorable Ruku here he'll say, at least I've said it. I remember one time I said, some of these bills we are passing without discussing may actually be rejected in court. And from the other side, I can remember somebody saying, which court? Somebody actually started back and said, which court? And now it comes, new clauses were added. And I remember one time we had a very bitter argument that that clause wasn't there. And so that means, what are we as Parliament going to do? Have we learned the lesson? Even after we have been chased away by Gen Z from Parliament, have we learned? I'm still getting the impression that people think that getting Mbadi in, the four in, and there seems to be a lull that you have not solved the problem. We have not solved. I start with the one of Parliament. Parliament has to do its job. That's why when Honorable Ruku was saying we are together on one side, I don't want to hear that myself. I must remain with an attitude of opposition, because you know what has actually hurt this country most? One, a president who is not listening, everybody has said that. 2, a Parliament that was to a large extent being directed by the same person who is not listening. So then we passed these laws, and we knew even the process was not right. I actually know one law, on a book, maybe I forget the detail, I'll tell you. A law which was passed without the mover replying, because put the question and let's vote. And we start to ignore small processes. So I think the challenge to Parliament is actually very big. We are going to help these cabinet secretaries as Parliament and for the country. We must start looking at our role in Parliament as very, very important. You know, if your advisor, if you start instructing your advisor, you don't need that advisor. If you start instructing the lawmakers, you don't need them. You can yourself write the law. So I think that is, in my mind, that's what's going to be very important. But if we correct that, then we have to say, let me comment on communication. You have to communicate something. So even if you're a good communicator and you have nothing to communicate, it is the content of the communication. You have content, then you blame communication. But in this case, I don't think we had content. And people know, even if you're a bad communicator, if you are trying to say something good, they'll pick it. Because what is done by government is felt by people in their houses. So even if it is being communicated badly, they will know, now I can buy sugar to rest, and now my child is good. Now I went to the hospital the other day and I actually got medicine. That the delivery is a bigger communication than all other things. Delivery. And when you look at what is happening, as my colleague has said, there are policies which arise from manifestos. But let me tell you, in the very end, you have manifestos, you change them into policies, you change them into programs, but in the end, what is Mwananchi getting? That is why you can have what sound like very different policies. People don't want to know about them. What they want to know, at the end of the day, I went to hospital. Did I get a doctor? Did I get medicine? And was I able to pay? Was it affordable? So whatever your manifesto is, whatever your policy is, that is where it must go to. But in this country, starting from where I left on Parliament,
right,
I think we must also tone down politics. I've been in the executive before, and I think the time we were working, what really helped us, the politics was minimal. So that you tone down politics, the professionals can work, and you listen to the professionals. You see, cabinet secretaries are the link between the president and actually the professional people in the ministries. Now, I can say here very clearly, because I've had ministers saying, you know, that was a presidential directive. And then the technical people are telling, I had the situation, the technical people say, this thing couldn't be, we knew it was going to be a problem. Then I asked, but why did you do it? Say, it was a presidential directive. I asked the minister, if a technical person thinks something is not going to work, it is a president directive. The president is also right to direct, because there's a way he sees the country, there's a way he wants the country to run. So he gives direction in that. But he's not the technical person to do it. When it reaches the technical person and it can't work, the only person who can bridge that gap is the cabinet secretary, who can tell, or they say in the cabinet, tell the president, sir, as much as we wanted this, the technical advice we are getting means we should do it this way. Normally, they don't want to change it totally. They just want to do it in a way that will work. But if the cabinet secretary don't do that, and that is a challenge that actually we have not talked here. We have changed the team. We have changed the players. What about the captain? The captain has to change. We can't change another captain now. That would be a very different way. But the captain himself must change how he does things to help the new team to work.
Does the captain know that?
Well, now maybe we need a communication. There's a communication for expert here to let the captain know.
All right. So, Mheshimiwa Ruku, let's take a little bit with the Finance Act of 2023, because you are here, you attended several sessions and we spoke about it, you defended, we debated. eventually a decision was made. The Court of Appeal fails or finds that actually there are those clauses that are introduced without public participation, that Parliament was not accountable to the people. They didn't explain to them, why did you reject what you said in the public participation? Why did you accept what you said in the public participation? If you recall, what was the process like? Because yes, the bill is tabled, taken to the committee, the Finance and Planning Committee. There's public participation. There is debate around the country. How were new clauses arrived at?
Sam, even before I come to your point, I think it is not right for Dr. Nyikal, Mheshimiwa Nyikal, to say that there is nothing to communicate as far as this government is concerned. That's extremely wrong. A lot have been achieved by Kenya Kwanza administration, from the police, from judiciary to agriculture, when we are talking about Astra's fund, to digitization, to education sector, housing, quite a lot has been achieved. For instance, when you're talking about housing, between 2018 and 2022, only 11,000 units were built, and this administration, within 8 months, is constructing or is putting up that 6,000 units.
In how many months?
In 8 months, you know. So there is a lot.
The promise was 250,000.
The construction is still ongoing. When it comes to remove or reduce taxes to support businesses, there's quite a number of taxes and levies which have been reduced or removed in totality. So there is a lot that these administrations done which need to be communicated properly. So it's not right for Dr. Nyikal to say there's nothing committed to communicate. Also, when we are talking about Parliament, I think Parliament is a very strong institution. For the period I've been there, I've seen very diligent staff who will not allow a law to pass to go to the next stage if the procedure is not properly followed. In terms of calling a mover to reply, I don't think the cracks we have in Parliament, and I believe even in the Senate, surely let's give credit where it deserves. Okay. Let's not politicize.
Please, let's get to the specific question.
What I'm trying to say is Nyikal is wrong to say that there are some laws in Senate or in National Assembly which passes without calling the mover to reply. The clerks we have, very well trained in Parliament, cannot allow. I think because he said there's a particular law. Probably the assignment then is to find which law that was. Then you can check the handset. But as you do that, the question I asked you: what could have happened that post-public participation there are new clauses being introduced? Who caused those clauses to be introduced? Is it the people? Is it Parliament? Is it the executive? I don't know. I have not had a situation where we have new clauses which were not there in the original document pre-public participation, and also after public participation. We always go to the committee of the whole, where the members go through each and every section one by one, and amendments are made. And once all the amendments are made, after that, that is the document which is carried forward for the president to accept, so that it can become law. So I have not had a situation where, after the committee of the whole, the document will go, it can be inserted several sections or clauses which were not taken through the procedure, the laid-down procedure, the legislative procedure. So I can't be able to comment on something which I have not been able to see it happening. I know proper procedures are followed in Parliament, whether Senate or National Assembly, and the Committee of the Whole is where we all participate in coming up with amendments, necessary amendments.
You're doubting the finding of the Court of Appeal. You're contesting, rather.
I have not seen where we have
in the finance bill. If you allow me to say something. The finance bill, once there is a process that I actually question. When the committee had finished, and the committee report came, the process is the committee, the report goes to the speaker. It comes to Parliament, the speaker approves it, then it is for now circulation. And now that is when it is the property of the House, and that when it's a public document. In the finance bill, between that, the one part of the committee, the Kenya Kwanza part, actually went to State House before this thing became a public document. I think that can be proved. And I raised it in the House. What was the Speaker's response? As I can see this document here, I don't see any evidence that it was there. It doesn't have to be written. But why was it now going to be presented to the President? And remember, when the amendments on the most critical areas came, they were announced from State House before we went to Parliament.
You're talking about Finance Bill 2024?
Yes, yeah.
The one was just defeated?
That was withdrawn.
Yes.
Yes, that is what happened. And I raised it in Parliament. There is also perception, how things are seen. If you want to do something, you do it in a way that is done. Like that is actually when the Kenya Kwanza side, I don't think the other parts of the committee were there. They went there, they talked about it, and from there, some statements were read, and what areas are going to be changed. I still believe that didn't give a good impression to the public.
Okay. All right, I'll get to
and I think on that particular one, I think there was an issue on the fuel levy that was coming later. I think
road maintenance. Yes,
which came later.
Just to clarify,
I'll get to you.
Just to clarify, Sam, that new clauses can only come from public participation. That the process of taking the bill, whether finance bill or any other bill, through public participation, that is where we can get more information which can form into new clauses. But also these new clauses will be subjected to the Committee of the Whole, where amendment will be made, where every single clause or section will be read and approved by the whole House. So,
and I think that's the problem that the court was finding, because part of its judgment is that the appeal is allowed to the extent that a declaration being is hereby issued that sections, they are all listed. They are on areas of income tax, value-added tax, excess duty act, miscellaneous fees and levies act, Kenya Revenue Authority Act, Retirement Benefits Act, Alcoholic Drinks Control Act of 2010, Special Economic Zones Act, and Export Processing Zones Act are unconstitutional, null and void for not having been subjected to fresh public participation and having been enacted in total violation of the constitutionally laid down legislative path. That's what the judges found.
I respectively disagree with the opinion of the Court of Appeal.
Right.
Sometimes, I've said it in the past, we normally have some idiotic ruling from our courts, and I think this is one of them.
What does that mean?
The House took through all the necessary processes, and one of them, which is very key, is public participation. And I said it before, the centrality of our Constitution is public participation. The Finance Bill 2023 was taken through public participation. Public informed the committee on the new clauses, which may be of, may make the finance bill more responsive to the public or to the needs of the nation, and they were included. They were taken through the legislative processes in Parliament, which also include the second reading and the third reading, which includes the Committee of the Whole House, where every member is required or can be able to bring in amendments.
Okay.
And I remember my brother
fine.
here, Honorable Nyika, had quite a number of amendments. Some of them were declined because they touched on matters concerning Article 141 of our Constitution or something, which the Speaker and to do a ruling. So I respectively disagree with the Court of Appeal.
Okay, that's what Buruku, you've made your point.
Kind of,
Senator Kajwang, of course, members of parliament, some of them at the National Assembly, including Mheshimiwa Kimani Ichung'wah, actually dared judges to resign and go run for parliamentary seats and make laws in parliament. But in the end, so we have a situation that there's an extent of revenue that the government cannot legally collect unless they successfully appeal at the Supreme Court. But still, there are questions about the lawmaking process by Parliament. Are those questions idle, really?
The questions are valid. And it would be unfortunate for us to cast aspersions on independent institutions like the judiciary. Because, you know, sometimes when they make rulings that favor us, we celebrate. I know people who celebrated when they made rulings on the BBI. And the same people are mourning when the decisions are made on other matters that concern them. So I think the matters were taken to court. The state had an opportunity to present the alternative views, and the Court of Appeal, their decision, unless the government goes to the Supreme Court. And, you know, at the Supreme Court, there's not much. It's really talking about whether substantive justice was done in the earlier processes. I am happy that the courts are standing up, because I've had a problem with the institutions that have been established under this constitution: the executive, parliament, the judiciary, but there are other institutions also, because we've got a chapter in our constitution on independent offices and constitution, and the objectives of those independent offices is stated there. It is supposed to decongest power, to spread it out away from the executive and judiciary and legislature that has been domineering and acting as if they're the only persons, you know, to whom power has been donated by the people. You have seen a very unfortunate exchange between two very important institutions: the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution and the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. These are the institutions who are mandated to give effect to Chapter 6 of the Constitution on integrity. They are not working together. You have seen the DCI also getting involved in things that look like political witch hunt with respect to even the latest demos. You have seen even other institutions like the Kenya National Human Rights Commission not able to give Kenyans a true and fair picture of the deaths and extrajudicial killings that have happened after the protests that we have seen in this country. So we should not be shooting institutions, we should rather be strengthening institutions. I'm quite happy to go back to the 2022-2023 the 2021-2022 Finance Act. Because under that Finance Act, the fishermen that I represent in Lake Victoria were paying 8% or tax, were being levied 8% tax on fuel or petroleum products. And the economy of my area relies a lot on fuel. When we are crossing the lake, we are using boats that consume petrol or consume diesel. When we are fishing this little fish called omena, we are using lanterns that are fueled by petroleum. So I'll be very happy if we can go back to that position, because I think it was a position that was more favorable to Kenyans. We had a government that came in with grand ambitions. And I do agree with Mbadi when he said that our problem is at the budgeting stage. We first decide what we want to spend before figuring out how we are going to raise that money. We need to first agree how much do we have in the pocket before we decide how much we are going to spend. And so there was this over-ambition that we could double the rate on fuel. Of course, that gave the exchequer close to 50 billion Kenya shillings in additional collections, just from 8 to 16. Now, if you roll it back, it means that the state is going to lose close to 50 billion. It might even be more, because what the state collected half year was about 26 billion. So if you multiply by 2, it could come to that amount. If the state cannot get 60 billion to finance its plans, where is it going to get that money from? I do not agree, and I do not believe that the solution then would be to go to the markets to borrow more. The solution is to cut our coat according to the size of the cloth that we have. there's a lot of wastage in government, both at the national and at the county level. I have been quite outspoken when it comes to looking at the accounts and the wastage at county level. But remember, that's just 15% of the total revenues. In fact, if you look at it as a percentage of total budget, it is probably just 10% of the total budget, because we've got almost a 4 trillion budget and counties are getting just about 400 billion. What we must focus on is to reduce waste. But for once, I want to thank the Gen Zs. The Olympics is going on. There is no delegation of MPs in place. at least none has been uncovered so far.
Okay.
Maybe you can ask Mike Okinyi if you can find any.
Sure.
Yeah. So we are already seeing some subconscious acts of prudence, but it needs to be pushed further. We need to see it from the presidency. We need to see it in the executive. And some in medieval times, when an emperor felt exposed and when the public was outraged, would wake up and find the head of a senior official in the public square. I am not saying that the president should sacrifice anybody, but that sacrifice should not be on a pillory the way it used to be in medieval times. We should see people in court.
Okay.
We should see people going through the criminal justice system. We should not be seeing the DPP, the ODPP, being used for political convenience. Out of the gunny bags of cash that Gen Z were protesting about, have we even set up an inquiry to find out what was the source of the money and how these people got to it? Out of the inquiry that we've been doing yesterday and the previous days on vetting of public officials, we are being given very huge amounts of net worth. In fact, for me, that is one of the most useless questions that we are asking. Because if you're going to ask someone about their net worth, then you must also ask them how much they are paid in terms of taxes. Someone tells you that my income has grown by 100 million over the last 1 year because of appreciation of value. But we introduced tax on everything, including capital gains. Has this person paid tax commensurate to the increase in their wealth? And you make the young people, you are actually making 99.9% of Kenyans feel very poor. When you have been the one saying that you are fighting for their rights, and when it comes now to declaration of net worth, you are telling them, fine, I didn't do well in school, but I'm a billionaire. So, get rich first and explain later. We must, and as a way forward, Sam, Raila Odinga was very clear that I will donate my best players to stabilize this boat. Really, not to save Ruto, but to stabilize the boat. But a few things must be done because the boat is leaking. And that's why he was insistent. You recall when people were at KICC, he said, let's have a framework for conversation.
Right.
And it was taken out of context. People thought that it was the traditional conversations. But what Raila Odinga had in mind was an agenda-setting conversation, so that we are saying that this broad-based government, its first priority would be, number one, to address the concerns of the youth. Now, the concerns of the youth have probably been captured in the Constitution, and it's just about coming up with an action plan. What then do? You appoint Kipchumba Murkomen as a Minister for Youth Affairs. Isn't that an insult and a slap in the face of the youth? The next thing that national conversation was supposed to do is get the military off the street. What is the military doing in the street? We are going to tempt them. You have seen the public is now cheering them on, and they'll start feeling like heroes. The military establishment, if you look at it as a pyramid, at the bottom it is full of Gen Zs. It is full of our brothers and sisters. They feel and see the suffering that people are seeing and feeling outside. If we keep these boys and girls in the street, they will take over. Another matter that we should have dealt with is a proper economic revival plan. You cannot bully people into economic revival by telling them, I know what is good for you, I must build for you houses, I must kill NHIF and bring in something else that nobody understands. So we are not there yet. Even if Ruku says we're in government, we have just donated players, but the minimum conditions for engagement must be a conversation that addresses the concerns of the Gen Z and the concerns that Kenyans have raised over the years. And until that is done,